Hello, Python Web Conference, wherever you're coming into the conference from. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming to my talk, or I guess if you're watching the recording afterwards, I still really appreciate that. So I want to talk about taking Python web applications that are probably really great applications, really fast, really well built, but make them fast from your user's perspective, no matter where they are in the world. So this is web apps that fly with CDNs. So let's jump into it. We're going to do a little bit of slides to set the stage here, and then we're going to do mostly code-focused exploration here. So just for those of you who are not totally sure, haven't really thought a whole lot about this, what is a CDN? That over there on that little dot on the East Coast of the US, that's our web app, our Python web app running in a data center over there. We've got some user on the US West Coast who wants to interact with it, right? So they want to log in, check out, maybe the reading articles, whatever our site does, they're going to come do that, right? And this is pretty quick. It's about 100 millisecond ping time across the US, a little bit of static caching on the web server side of things, and it'll go pretty decently quick for that user. But we have users all over the world, right? This is the internet. That's what's so amazing about the internet. It never ceases to amaze me. People from everywhere can connect with us. So we got another user over here near Sydney, and they also want to check out our website. It's a little bit farther away. So if it was just this one request, honestly, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I've traveled around and interacted with my website and other sites that I kind of know how they work behind the scenes, Middle East, Europe, and so on. And the right level of static caching and stuff, maybe a request or two is slow, but it's not too bad. However, it's not just a single request, as we'll see. There, like many of these web pages, like almost all websites, besides real simple ones, there's many requests, as we'll see. So the CDN says, well, let's take most of those files, if not all of it, and move it into a bunch of different locations, right? Let's replicate that to maybe over 100 servers distributed throughout the world. So that US West visitor, they've got a data center right down the street. A person near Sydney, a couple 100 kilometers away from them, and they're right there by the code as well. So it almost doesn't matter where you are in the world. You got your website really close to you. So how do we take our standard deployment of a Python web app running with maybe fronted by nginx, running on MicroWSGI or gUnicorn, and then without really touching our code hardly at all, how do we turn it into something where this is our deployment infrastructure, right? Having this many servers throughout the globe to work with feels like you've been hired by big tech, right? You're now all of a sudden working for Google or some amazing, huge tech company. But as you'll see, this is cents, dollars per month, potentially, and you get this awesome infrastructure. So that's what this talk is about. So web pages require more than one request. Yes, that's very much true. So here over on the Talk Python training site, here's the course catalog. Pull up the network tools. We'll be spending some time in the network tools here. Pull up the network tools. You can look down here. There's 109 requests just for this page. And this is not even like a fancy front-end framework type of web app. It's just server-side Chameleon HTML type of code. And yet 109 requests. And also still only 196 milliseconds with that over 100 millisecond ping time across the US, right? So pretty impressive, but also clearly requiring lots of requests, especially that first time around, right? Now, it's easy to, when you think of like, how do I make my web app awesome? It's easy to think, well, what I got to do is make the server-side code awesome, because that's where we spend almost all of our time, right? You might think, okay, well, the database, we're going to really tune those indexes, or maybe we're going to scale that out, or maybe we go crazy and shard it. More likely, you'd put some kind of caching tier in front of it, like Redis or something along those lines, and make that just completely fly. And sure, if the backend code is super slow, that's going to have a knock-on effect for every other experience people have with your website. So I pulled up CNN here because, well, a couple of reasons. One, it's an example of a really fast server-side app, at least to the degree that they might cache what's being generated here and so on. It's a fairly terrible, and gosh, I'd almost go and say this is like an immoral website. And I'm not talking about like the politics of like CNN versus Fox, like not even addressing that. Like if you go to this website, they'll put 43 different tracking companies on you in addition to their website running. So the client side experience is actually pretty terrible, even though the server side time is only 40 milliseconds, like round trip. So when I visit this page, I got a response loaded in my browser in 40 milliseconds. That's super impressive. So you must think, well, they've really optimized this. This is going to be like a, double thumbs up sort of experience, even if there are trackers and whatnot. Just that kind of speed is going to be amazing, right? We'll see. So one of the things when you're working in this part of your app and you're making these kinds of analyses is, how does my user perceive it? So it's really easy for me to run the code locally and then interact with it. And you're like, oh, my site is super fast. Look at this. Well, sure, because most of everything is local. I can run in a data center, but chances are you're not too far away from that data center, right? My example, the East Coast, West Coast, US, it would still look pretty darn fast. How do I simulate being that person in Sydney? How do I simulate being maybe in Cincinnati, but on a 3G or slow LTE network, right? So Google came up with this thing called Page Speed Insights over at developers.google.com/speed. And it's really cool. It gives you all sorts of analysis, if you haven't seen this, from that perspective that I just described. I can put a URL in here and it'll say, all right, I'm going to pretend that I've never visited this site before with no cache. Now I'm going to try it with a cache. I'm going to try it as a mobile phone. I'm going to try it on a slow network. I'm going to try it from different locations, all those different things, right? And it'll give you a grade. Here you can see that it's graded example.com 100 out of 100. That's a pretty good grade. Now, this is nice, but it only tests publicly accessible web pages. So, because you put it into some external system, how is that system supposed to get to like the internal stuff? So, for example, that the course catalog I was talking about, what if I log in and then I go to, here's the details of a particular course, right? Google doesn't own that course. They don't have an account. They can't test that page. So we have this thing called Lighthouse, which is the code name of PageSpeed Insights previously, I believe. And you can run that in all your Chromium-based browsers. So you might have seen this before in your DevTools. You've got Elements for Inspect Element. You've got Network, but you've also got Lightspeed. And we can run this against CNN. And look how poor they do. 70 on performance. Wait a minute. They got 40 milliseconds all the way to my browser. That's awesome. No. That's only part of the story. The other part of the story is all the crappy front end stuff that they've done. And notice there's 31 errors in the dev console in the right here. And the reason is I'm running Next DNS on my network and I'm running Vivaldi, both of which are blocking almost all of those tracking tools. So these are coming up as errors instead of coming up as part of the web app's normal operation. So this is actually less bad than it would be. So I encourage you to not just look at your site, your web apps from how is the server running, but look at it from how are users doing it. We're going to use this Lighthouse thing to do so. All right, so I avoided using a CDN for a long time. Honestly, I kind of didn't really feel like I needed it until last Black Friday. And I wrote about this on my blog. I sent out a bunch of emails, said, hey, everybody, Black Friday is out, sent it out on social media. And it was awesome. A bunch of people came and checked out what I was offering there. And then I opened up ISSH in the server, said, well, how's the server doing? Let me just give this a quick look. 85% CPU usage, 89, 91, 92. I'm like, oh no, this is not good. If it keeps going like this, it's going down. And I thought, well, what's wrong with the Python code? Maybe you check out the database. It turns out both of those were less than 10%. It was all nginx. It was all static files. And I thought, wow, that's ridiculous. But sure enough, and that's the kind of thing that's super easy, as we'll see, to bust out with a CDN here. I also really don't like complexity in my infrastructure. You know, Talk Python's a small team, me, a couple of consultants, a handful of authors. Like, we don't have a whole DevOps team. And so I just, you know, I don't want to have too much complexity there. And I felt like CDNs were going to add, you know, a whole layer of, like, say, cache staleness and stuff. I was worried about the cost. We do about 15 terabytes. That is 15,000 gigabytes a month of traffic. So if I threw that into S3, that would be $1,380. In fact, I thought, well, if I'm going to replicate that same type of experience to hundreds of points on the globe, surely we multiply 1,000 by some number I don't want to think about, right? Turns out it's actually way cheaper, which is awesome. And lack of awareness. I just really hadn't done that much with it before. So hence the stock. All right. So this doesn't have to be slow, right? CNN, they've probably spent over $1 million a year on getting their website running, their data centers, their bandwidth, the people maintaining them. Like I said, we have a much, much smaller team in terms of infrastructure. We probably spend a couple $100 a month. And yet look at the light speed score here. 97, 100, 92, 100. Like, you don't have to be bad. It helps that I don't put 43 trackers on people when they come to the website, but still, putting that aside, I could bet we could make CNN go a lot better as well if we tried. All right. So let's jump into some code. As I said, we're going to try to focus in on that. Got a little app for you here, hiding over in PyCharm. Let's fire it up. All right, here we go. So remember, I said local is always fast, all right? And, you know, there's no place like 127.0.0.1, right? It's fast, it's easy. The bandwidth is incredible, but this is not a great way for us to simulate this experience. So one of the challenges I had putting this talk together, as well as just doing this work, is in order to really see the problems and get a sense, you need to put it somewhere farther away from you, right? My first thought was, well, I'll fire up a VPN and I'll put it in, you know, Europe or Frankfurt or something like that. I'll log into Frankfurt and then I'll like somehow loop back or something like that. And it turns out the way the CDNs work, they ask, well, what for this IP address, what is the closest server? Well, guess what? The closest CDN server is also in Frankfurt. So it's not really great. So what do? Well, what I'm going to use is this thing called ngrok. I don't know if you've used ngrok before, but it's fantastic for testing web apps. And what it lets us do is create an SSH tunnel that comes back into our dev machine. And it turns out it has about 150 millisecond ping time, which is actually really convenient. So I'm going to run ngrok HTTP. The app is running on port 10,001. This is a Flask app, as we'll see in just a moment. It typically runs on 5,000. In the latest version of macOS, it's using port 5,000 on the open on the loopback, or not the loopback, the external IP address for like sharing and stuff, which is super annoying. So I had to change this to 10,001. And because I have a paid account, I can actually create a CDN so it's stable. But if you don't, you can just, not a CDN, a subdomain, you can create, it'll just randomly generate each time, which is a bit annoying, but it still works. So now we can open this and notice our web app is not as fast as we would like. Did you see that stuff all slide in there? Okay, but I'm going to work from over here. But this is actually, if you look down here, if I refresh and then I refresh that, you can see it's actually still hitting my dev server. Okay, so we don't have too much complicated stuff going on here, but sure, this feels kind of slow. So what is this app? Or it's meant to be slow at the start, by the way. So what is this app? So this app is this thing called Video Collector. And I said, your favorite videos, old school Yahoo style. The Yahoo gets a lot of credit for being like one of the cool startups of the .com boom, but it has such incredibly humble origins, let's say. And like Yahoo, all it was people would go around the internet, find nice stuff, interesting things, and like catalog it, put it under categories, and then write down the title and the link. Like that was the whole startup. Crazy that that was a thing. So here's your videos like that, right? So if you're interested in Apple, we'll come over here, and then there's a bunch of videos here. You can see they're dragging in a little slow, but that's okay. We can watch WWDC, iJustine. Here's a presentation that Paul Everett and I did together. You can see some stuff about racing. Like there's just a bunch of videos, and these actually play. Like if I click this, here's a crazy video of a guy who created a $100,000 mixed reality sim racer, but you can check that out later, right? We're not here to necessarily fool around on YouTube. So our goal is to take this thing that seems not particularly snappy, given that it's going over this SSH tunnel loop back to my dev server, which is not the best deployment, if you're wondering. Our goal is to take this and use a CDN to make it fast and snappy. Now, when you think CDN, you might be thinking Fastly, you might be thinking Cloudflare, but there's one that I really, really like. It's got a bunch of cool features. It's really affordable. It's one of the fastest ones out there, and I just love the philosophy of it as well. And that one is bunny.net. So bunny.net's interesting. They're a European company. They're super focused on privacy and got a great API, great website. And they also happen to have a really, really fast network. So over 80 terabits, 26 milliseconds on average anywhere in the world. So really, really cool. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this CDN to make that website that I just showed you rank really high with light speed, hopefully, and obviously work way better than it does. We got a decent amount of code to play with, a couple scenarios I want to look at with you. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, what you need to do is you got to create an account here if you want to use it, clearly. The pricing, remember one of the concerns I brought up around CDN was like, if we're paying $1,300 already, what is it going to be here? Well, it turns out that the pricing is about 1 cent per gigabyte, and in practice, it actually turns out to be less for some reason. So it's, for me, at least in our day-to-day usage, it's about 18 times less expensive than hosting out of S3, even though you get 114 different points of replication, right? Which is awesome. Okay, I'm not affiliated with them, other than that I'm a client of theirs. I'm not trying to like sell you on their stuff or anything, but that's the story. So when you log in, here's your behind the scenes, like your hello to your bunny. And you can see here, right now we're doing 14.23 terabytes the last 30 days. I believe this is like it's a little confusing. This stuff up here is a rolling 30-day window, and the stuff down here, like how much you paid, is a monthly price. So it's the 15th, halfway through the month, and we paid that. So the final price, if things kept going, would be around $70 this month, which is incredible considering what S3 would be. What we're going to work with is this thing called pull zones. You can see we have some that deliver the podcasts, some that deliver the courses, and so on. And we would go and create one of these. And I've already created one just for the sake of speed. It's actually super fast, but I just don't want to miss a setting. So you would just go click new create pull zone. There are two kinds, some that are backed by the equivalent of S3 storage. They've got like a disk, a cloud drive sort of thing. Or what you can say is just go over to my website. So in this case, check this out. It says the origin of everything that people are trying to get from you comes from kennedy-cdn-talk.ngrok.io. Right, that's the deployment location of my website. And then it gives us this subdomain here that says, okay, well, what you're going to use is this. And for say Talk Python, we have like cdn.talkpython.fm for talkpython.fm. So it's a subdomain. So it looks like all this content belongs to us. I'm not going to do this here because I don't really know how to easily set up a dynamic ngrok subdomain as like a stable part of a DNS record. So probably doable with a CNAME, but it doesn't matter, right? We're just going to use this, but just be aware that on yours, you would have a subdomain, so no one would know what the heck you're using here anyway. All right, and what we can do is we can go over here and say turn on caching, and don't turn on caching time, but I say cache everything. I don't care what happens, cache it for 3 months. That might make you worry about staleness, cache staleness, and those kinds of things. But it turns out we've got a fix for that. Okay. You turn on something called Origin Shield. We have this on for the others as well. And what Origin Shield means is we saw there's 114 places that they replicate to. So what this says is if any one of those places have got a hold of one of the files, instead of going back to my slow website and putting more load on my server, I want you to replicate it within the nodes, basically. Okay. One thing that's nice about this is you can have private content. You have signed content that doesn't allow people to access it unless you give them a temporary signed URL, just like S3. So that's great. You can go and set up a bunch of other things like limits. You can fiddle with the headers and so on. You can go watch your stats, and there's even like a live map. But for the sake of time, let's not play with those. Let's go see if we can go and take that business right there and make our website faster. Okay, so first, let's work on the images because they're the most obvious. So if I go over here, back here, there we go. And I do a Command-Shift-R, or Windows, do Control-Shift-R, just to do a hard refresh where it drops. It still kept some of it, but come on, let's be slow. Go over here and turn on the dev tools. And one of the things you can do with the dev tools, besides dock them to the bottom, here's Lighthouse, go to the network and disable caching. So that helps a lot to sort of see stuff kind of rolling in. It's a little bit better than it was, but it's still, this little zoom bar y'all don't see is in the way. I can see it's not too bad, 100 mils or 1 second, which is, it's not ideal, but it's okay. You can see like this little bar, all this, the content coming in. Let's put this down, but not completely away. There we go. All right, over to our code. So we've got some really cool tech going on here. This is a Flask website using SQL model talking to the backend database, and is using HTMX for its front end, which is not really a front end framework, but using HTMX for its front end framework so it doesn't reload pages. We'll get to explore those in a moment. And I put everything into a template folder, and then over in the different views, I've broken these up like the views, let's see, for videos. We've got category and play and so on. So I'll put those over here, like category and play. All right. Let's look at the home one. That's the first one we saw here. Okay. So it says over here, we're just doing /image categories CNAME. Well, that's good, but that's serving straight out of our website, right? Straight out of our infrastructure. So what we can do is we can just say HTTPS://HTTPS, got to spell that right, and then paste in that CDN URL they gave us there. Now, the first time, let me go over to the run. The first time that I hit this, what's going to happen is I'm going to make a request. This is going to tell the browser to go over to the bunny.net CDN. The CDN is set up as an origin URL style. So it says, hey, I don't have, whatever this category is, this Apple or this racing or python.jpg, whatever it is, for the category title, category image. And so it's going to go and make a request like a regular web user back over to us. But then from then on, all subsequent requests should be, replicated through that CDN. All right, so let's go over here and I'll hit that. Remember, caching is disabled. Should see this over here. All right, now if I clear it out again, we'll probably still see some requests, but not for those images. All right, let's see. So here we still see the CSS and the JavaScript. All of this is still coming through here. Why is that? Interesting. Oops, no, go back. Let me pull up this, say, view this up there. All right, there we go. Maybe it just hadn't replicated enough. So you can see it's actually coming out of the CDN, right? So if I hit that, it's pulling it in. Let's make sure, otherwise it's going to be not as awesome. Now we pull that back. Now it's still coming back through here. That's definitely weird. No, not that. Let's check here. Don't need that one. Origin, URL. Caching is what we want. Cache, okay. Query string, yeah, so looks okay. All right. Let's keep going and I'll figure this out. So over here, we've got our, it tells us to go to the CDN. It should be serving it up again. Maybe it's just not quite got the origin shield working all the way yet. So we're going to go and basically put this onto the different pieces of our website. So over here, we've got these, but let's go also look at the shared section. So hold on for this one. This CSS here, I'm going to put it like that, right? We don't want to have the CSS coming off our server. We want to have it coming off of here and here. Beware caching means beware stale caching. We'll come back to that. Let's see what else. Look, search for static. Now here's some JavaScript. Now, it might look like there's an error. That's PyCharm saying, I can no longer give you autocomplete out of this file unless you allow me to download it. So it's not an error. It's just like, we're going to download this so that we can basically parse it locally. Suppose it could just do that on its own. You can see most of them I've already done. Okay, so I don't think there's any more images. Let's just look for /static through here. The main thing that we need to hit is just this kind of layout wrapper, common look and feel version. You know what I think I did that the stuff wasn't working better. Like, why is this not caching? For some reason, I don't have it set up to auto restart Flask when you change the template. So unlike Pyramid, which automatically does that. Okay, so let's go over here and disable caching for a second. Hit this. First time it should come in a little bit slow because the CDN has to go back and get it. Let's go here. This come back. Boom. Look at that. Now, this might be a little less impressive over Zoom. We haven't done this page, by the way, but watch when I come back here, there's almost no flicker. Super, super good. Okay, so that's great. Let's go real quick and just do that again. Although, let's look at DevTools real quick. By the way, in Vivaldi, you can type over here and just type DevTools, Command or Control E. And disable caching, okay. And let's just go and hit this. See where these are all coming from. Look at this. We've gone from a second to 238 milliseconds, which is quite a bit better. All of these are coming out of disk cache because it went through the CDN and then the CDN said, keep that for 3 months, please. So there you have it. This bootstrap, yeah, that's good. That all looks good. So our document came in 200 milliseconds right there. And then we were done really, really quickly after, which is excellent. Okay, so it looks like almost everything here is working great. There's a few things that add to the way the page reports. So there's picture-in-picture and other junk that Vivaldi sticks in the page after it loads. And that takes a little bit of time, but you can't do anything about it. So just kind of ignore that. All right, so this is great. We can make this a little bit better. So because we get right to it, honestly, this probably doesn't matter that much. But one of the things that you can do is you can use this thing called a pre-connect tag here on MDN, and it looks like this. Copy. So what we can do is we can say, look, you might be downloading a bunch of resources, you might be hitting other places, but later in the page, you're going to need to go to this domain. And the way that this works is the browser will open a connection and keep it open and then make a bunch of requests for these static resources. Ideally, if this was supporting, say, HTTP2, it might even combine those requests and stream a bunch of them. So we can go over here and say pre-connect to the CDN so that basically it'll open that connection, it'll start opening that connection sooner. So if it's working somewhere else and then, oh, now it hits this one, it's already connected. That'll give it even a little bit more speed, okay? Another thing, just while we're here, this is really, really quick. Check this out, this is not great. Google Fonts, German court. If you spell court, you're way more likely to get to it. Google Fonts lands website privacy fine by the German court. Germany has decided that Google Fonts violates the GDPR. Basically, almost all the things that Google puts in there, even if you just put like a link to a YouTube image on your page, Google is putting tracking content onto your users, right? And if you don't say, hey, user, I'm sending all your info over to Google, do you mind? Then you're going to be in trouble. And so I told you I like the zen of bunny.net. One of the things they have is bunny.net fonts. If you go over here, and you go over here and pick, use it for free, pick a bunch of fonts. And what's cool about this is it's exactly the same API as it's meant to be a drop-in replacement for this. So I can just put bunny.net here, and it'll start using bunny.net instead of Google Fonts. And everything that follows is an exact replica, or is the same API as before. So do that really quick, and we now are a little bit better along the side of GDPR and privacy, which feels pretty awesome. So go back over here, hit it again, make sure it doesn't look different. It shouldn't change, but if it does, that means we screwed up the fonts. Okay, so this is good. Let's go and look at a few other things real quick. Now, one of the things that's awesome about this website, it's just so neat. So let's make this change real quick, then I'll show you. So it uses HTMX and Jinja partials, this library that I created. And so, for example, we have a continuous feed, like an infinite scroll type of thing of the videos. This is it's higher HTML for the infinite feed scroll, which is awesome. And it's got to replicate this over and over. So that is this section here, and it's got to loop over this. And then here's the trigger when you get to the bottom of the infinite scroll, if there are more. And it says, hey, we got to show these thumbnails and these video chunks all over the place. So we're going to use this thing called a partial, which is over here, like so. All right. Now, this is reused throughout the whole website in Jinja, and I'm looking for that. So if I change it here, it should change the entire website wherever it happens to be using those YouTube thumbnail equivalents. So let's go back and now have a look again. Remember, the first time this is going to be slow because we're going to have the CDN come in and get the files. But if I click on this, notice it takes a second, okay, and go back. But now, boom, instant. I know over Zoom it might not be instant because it's screen sharing, but it's like instant. Let's try EVs. First time a little chunky, but you go back and do it again. Coming out of the CDN, probably really cached, but would otherwise come out of the CDN. Python, same thing. Okay. So let's just double check. Like for example, view this image. Yep, out of the CDN, right? Okay, now let's go back and turn on our dev tool again. And just hit this page. Look at that, cache, page loaded 250 milliseconds. Very cool. And that one downloaded for some reason from the CDN. Let's go hit this one. Excellent. Okay. So pretty easy. We can go over here and actually we can look at the traffic. I think we can see stats just for this one at the bottom. Let me refresh it real quick. We made 991 requests and we've only got a 47% cache hit. You can see with at the beginning, when I had mine open, we're getting like 90%. So as this sort of spreads around, it'll get better, right? All right, let's go back here. And now we got this stuff cached and going nice and quick. Maybe just click on each one of them real quick just to make sure we've actually hit them before. There's some other cool features of this website that are automatically all brought in. So I showed you that infinite scroll. Now this shows 3 at a time and then it brings in the next. And I have to make it fake slow down because there's not that much data. So the database is really, really fast, but you'll see it kind of spin. But then as it comes in, like the images are instantly there. Isn't that cool? So love it. And then also as a search. So this is using HTMX to not refresh the page, but I could search for Apple. I could search for Python. I could search for WWDC. I could search for IndyCar and just blazing. Now, remember, this is looping out to the internet, coming back through an ngrok SSH tunnel back into my dev server. This is not a real server. It would be faster if I put it on nginx and then fronted that with a CDN for the static details. But pretty excellent here. I'm getting somewhat short on time, so let me just throw out a couple of other things here real quick. One of the challenges, let me see if I've copied the file over. So I'm in the thumbnail, not thumbnail, sorry, the image categories. Yes. So watch this. So here's our Apple. If I click on this, it shows this Apple file here. Normally, you might be able to say, well, if I change this file, maybe I'll just have people clear their cache or something, and I'll get a new picture coming up. But remember, even if I disable caching, all this is going to do is go and hit the CDN again. If I want to change any of this content, which like this is one of the hassles of CDNs and just caching in general, but it's like multi-layer when it's CDN is stale things. So let's go over here and see if I can first break things. Why did you not go to that file? Open in Finder. Well, I guess we're just going to go find it. It is, I think I threw it in here until I put it in source control for you all. Yeah. All right. So let's go down here real quick. And we've got Apple v2. See, it's this M2 thing. And maybe I want to change these. We want to make that V1 and V1, and that just Apple. So this effectively replaces, oops, hold on. Got the wrong one. Replaces that WebP. Yeah. Let's go and see if we can, I'll make sure I'll run it again, as if that makes any difference. And I'll refresh. Nope, still not here. DevTools, disable caching. Nope. Well, CDNs, they're no good. What's going on here? So there's one final thing that you need to do. I guess you don't need to, but I recommend that you do is if you can somehow make the URL change for every time the file changes. There's something about the URL contains some kind of stamp of the file that says, right now it is this version. You could actually just use a version number 123, but there's probably a quicker, easier way. And what I did is I built this little library that will take a MD5 hash super fast. It's not cryptographically safe. You might hear like, stay away from MD5. Like, yes, but it doesn't really matter because we're not trying to prevent hacking. We just need a thing that goes, oh, something has changed. So I'm going to go in here and put this callback to the server-side code that says what we're going to do is we're going to take this. Kind of copy this over here. Did I write it up there? Probably not. Anyway, I'll copy this over. Put that. You don't want the whole CDN. I mean, you might be able to make that work, but just a local file like that. And then I believe we have the extension already on here. So it'll be c.image, like so. Now let's go over here. Check that out. Beautiful. And if I go open image, you can see that it actually has this hash on the top. Now you might say, well, it's because the URL totally changed, Michael. But if I can go put it back here, I can go, you know what, that's a v2. That's a v2. That's the one it is now. And I don't remember if I have it turned on for caching. So I'm going to just rerun to make sure, because I'm pretty sure it will cache it just so it doesn't do that for every request. Boom, it's back. Okay. So just make sure I'm not going to do it because I've got like 1 minute left for this whole presentation, but wherever you've got this, there's a good chance you want to somehow put some kind of version thing on here. And in the case I just showed you, there's this build cache ID thing. We can go jump around. You can see real quick. It's nothing super fancy. It just comes in, grabs the file, loads it up, MD5s it, and then stores it in a dictionary in memory until you restart that, and then it has to regenerate. So that little tiny trick, plus, I know I've got like 1 minute left, folks who are moderating, but you need to come over here and make sure under caching that you go down here and you must have, this is off by default, vary by URL query string. Turn that on or this trick won't work. Other CDNs, maybe that's by default, maybe you turn it on in different ways, but make sure that that's set up. Otherwise, that little trick will have zero effect. And I guess let me just wrap that up here. So thank you so much. Do keep in touch. Find my articles over at mkennedy.codes. Listen to the Talk Python to Me podcast, which I'm the host and founder, co-host of Python Bytes. Talk Python training, saw a bit of that website where we have a bunch of Python courses, and finally connect with me on Mastodon at mkennedy@fosstodon.org. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Andy.